Good morning. It is so good to be here with you all this morning. I do see a lot of familiar faces, both here in front of me and on this great screen we have over here. So, as Tiffany said, I worked with Metro both in the summers of 2017 and 2018, being a part of mainly the Clue Camp experience, but also being here with you all at worship on Sundays and a part of the congregation. And like I said, familiar faces and new faces, but my time here was so important and so impactful to me, and so it really is a pleasure to get to be back here with you all and worshiping with you all this Sunday. So thank you all for having me. Um, this is the Sunday before Thanksgiving, as you all have probably already figured out, and the holidays I think can be meant to be a reflection over our past year. And I think we probably have a lot to reflect on. Hopefully some good memories over the year and more than likely some tougher moments as well. It's been a rough year for a lot of us, probably safe to say a rough 2 or 3 years at this point. And Thanksgiving is a holiday where we're told we're supposed to sit around our full tables and name all the things that we are grateful for. Gratitude, though, to be frank, for me at different times in these past few years has been a little harder than I remember it being before. And maybe some of you all can relate to that a little bit. We have lived through and maybe are living through some more despairing times. And it's okay sometimes to let ourselves feel the depths of that despair. I do believe, however, and I think you all know this, there is power in holding our sadness and our anger this time of year along with our moments of joy and our moments of laughter. I had a congregant at my church, the church I worked for in Boston, who coined a great term one holiday season called grativenting. And I wrote this before I even knew the exercise we were doing today, so you all are already one step ahead of me. But it's a word that sums up the complicated feelings I think so many of us can feel around the holidays of our great joy, our gratefulness for the people and the things that we have in our lives, and also to hold the pain and the trauma, and sometimes they're just plain annoyances that can come up for us this time of year. One feeling does not need to override or cancel out the others. We can hold all of these things simultaneously together. So, in that spirit, during the season, I invite you to continue the practice of grativenting. You are in a space that equally celebrates your most major and minor moments of gratitude and blessing this year, as well as your most major and minor moments of sadness and maybe just plain annoyance. We can be grateful for being employed while also recognizing that maybe our job's been really stressful this year and maybe we have some coworkers that are hard to get along with. We can be grateful for this beautiful building and also wish that the heat were on, right? We can be grateful for time spent with family, spent with friends who feel like family, and also grieve the people we are missing at our table, and while also griping about how much it costs us to get home. So as we move through our text this morning, let's continue this practice of grativenting. Let's hold the sadness that we feel while also looking forward to the possibilities of a life and a world we can build in our future post-crisis society. Our story today shares its own complicated feelings of both grief and beauty. It centers around a woman named Naomi. Naomi is married to Elimelech, and they start a family together in Bethlehem. But then there's a famine in Bethlehem, so they have to leave. So they go with their sons to a new country, to the country of Moab. And after they are settled in this new country, sadly, Naomi's husband dies. So she is now a widow with 2 sons. But then eventually, the 2 sons go on to marry 2 Moabite women named Orpah and Ruth. And keep in mind, this is important to the story, that we're living in a society where a woman's livelihood and her access to basic resources is totally dependent on being tied to a male person. So, although she's a little bit vulnerable because she is without a husband, she is temporarily secured by having these two male sons who would have been responsible for her and making sure she was taken care of and had a comfortable place to live. But then tragically, the text goes on to tell us that 10 years after her husband dies, both of Naomi's sons die as well. So Naomi now has no husband and no son, and she must now grieve for her husband and her children while also figuring out what's next. She is now in an extremely powerless and vulnerable position. So Naomi, in the midst of her deep grief and loss, she now has to figure out how she's going to survive. She hears that people in her homeland of Judah, a place where she had fled from years earlier, are now being treated more mercifully, that every person has been given enough food to eat. So she figures this is her best bet. So after all these years, she is making this uncertain journey back home. As she sets to embark on this journey, her two daughter-in-laws are by her side, and they're ready to go with her, ready to go to this land that would have been totally unfamiliar to them. And while both of them seem determined to remain with their mother-in-law, Naomi looks back at them and implores them to turn around and go home, to return to their own mother's houses. She blesses them and hopes that God will be as kind to them as they were to her in her time of loss. She implies that while they are still of childbearing age, that they should go home, find new husbands, and secure a life for themselves that is no longer possible for Naomi. Now, I think you can feel and imagine the emotional intensity that's happening in this moment of these three people who have shared years of life and loss together as they dwell on the sadness and the uncertainty that is before them. These women, they kiss each other and weep aloud. Ruth and Orpah clearly do not want to leave Naomi's side. But Naomi is insistent in her instructions to leave her behind. She reminds them that as far as the world is concerned, she doesn't have anything to offer them. She has no more sons in her womb, she says, and she is too old to be viewed by another man as an acceptable wife. Naomi believes little hope left in her life, and therefore she doesn't want her hopelessness and her despair to be a burden on her younger daughter-in-laws. While she feels as if she has run out of opportunity and possibility and that life has been cruel to her, she believes that there's still hope for these two younger women in the story. And at the second declaration, Orpah reluctantly leaves. She weeps and kisses her mother-in-law and turns back home. And while Orpah leaves, Ruth continues to physically cling on to Naomi's side. And Naomi then implores Ruth a third time to leave her behind. And that is when Ruth turns to Naomi and says some of the most beautiful words written in our holy text. She says to her mother-in-law, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There I will be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." At this declaration, Naomi finally recognizes Ruth's determination to stay with her, and she says no more. The two women head for the land of Judah side by side, not knowing what was in front of them, but committed to starting this scary and uncertain journey together. What we have here is a beautiful story about the power of love and the power of human relationships. This story comes from an ancient text that often doesn't even bother to mention a woman by name. And yet here we have a story about two women with dark skin who are widows and immigrants that transform the trajectory of their lives and the lives of those who read it and hear it through their love of one another. It is Naomi's love for Ruth that implores her to leave her behind. In the ancient culture that they live in, women were not allowed to own or inherit property. Therefore, they had no opportunity to secure wealth or resources without husbands or sons to claim it for them. Naomi knew the despair that would be ahead of her as a spouseless and childless woman, and loved Ruth too much to wish that life upon her also. But it was, in turn, Ruth's love for Naomi that compelled her to stay. These two women, they had no biological connection, and they did not anymore have a legal connection to each other either, but Ruth nevertheless persisted out of her love for her mother-in-law. It is love that Ruth had for Naomi that compelled her to stay by Naomi's side, not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. She had the opportunity to leave, but literally clung by Naomi's side instead. It is a love so authentic and overpowering that Naomi seems to have a very hard time accepting it. She does not even respond to Ruth's declaration, but rather finds it powerful enough to stop fighting her and allows Ruth to continue with her on the journey. So what does this ancient love story have to teach us about our own modern hearts and minds? As we sit and reflect around our tables this year, no matter what that table looks like or who is around it, maybe we can use Ruth's declaration of love for Naomi as a meditation on how we can continue to love and love better in our own lives. On how we can love ourselves, how we can love our neighbor, and how we can love those in our wider community, some whom we may never meet. When you go, I go. When you're forced from this country, so am I. Where you are made to lodge, there I will lodge also. Your people are my people, and your God is my God. When you die, I will die also. The thing about Ruth's love for Naomi that is so beautiful to me is that Ruth loves Naomi enough to see Naomi's plight as her own. She does not look upon her older, childless mother-in-law and feel pity or obligation. Rather, by loving Naomi so truly and so authentically, she is able to see her as an equal partner as they both journey to rebuild their lives together. What could we change about our world if we loved others the way Ruth loves Naomi? What if we began, and in some cases continued, to see another person's pain not as a sad, inevitable, pitiful reality, but as a threat to our own livelihood? What if we viewed another person's struggle to attain housing as our own struggle? What if we saw other communities' grief as our own grief as well? What if we showed concern for others out of a feeling of interconnectedness rather than of pity or responsibility? The turmoil and the tragedy that we've witnessed over the past couple of years gives us a lot to ponder over this holiday season. As we prepare for a day that commemorates a so-called peaceful interaction that happened between some of our European ancestors and our Native American community, interaction that never actually happened, for the record. Let us see the pain and the losses of our indigenous communities as our own pain and our own loss as well. Because 400 years later, their health and their livelihood continues to be threatened by colonization. A threat to their lives is a threat to our lives also. This Sunday, as was mentioned before, we also commemorate Trans Day of Remembrance, a day to honor and mourn individuals from the trans community who have been taken from us by hate-motivated violence. It is a tradition that was started in Boston after the brutal murder of a young woman named Rita Hester. Sadly, each year, as we found out earlier this morning, each year the list of names for us to honor and remember grows longer. The world is not always a kind or safe place to our trans community, and the sad truth is that if the world is not safe for trans people, it is not totally safe for any of us. However, a world where trans people are allowed to live and thrive will be a world where all of us are thriving. A world in which millions are denied access to healthcare is a world where we all get sicker. But a world where everyone gets to go to the doctor when they need to and when they want to is a world where we're all happier and healthier. So often we are sold a vision of a world of scarcity, a false fear that if all are given what they need, that there will not be enough for everyone. But the truth is, we have enough food on this planet for everyone to be fed. We have enough land and we have enough empty rooms for everyone to have a comfortable, safe place to sleep. We have enough money that everyone should have the opportunity to prioritize necessities in life, such as healthcare and education. And I want to remind you all here today that we not only have a moral obligation to make this world of enoughness a reality, but it would also create a better world for each one of us who live in it, in our communities and in our own personal lives. And when I say all these things, I don't want to discount the importance that privilege, some of the privileges we have plays in this, and how that definitely makes some of our lives easier than others. As a white woman, a white person living in the United States, there are numerous comforts and privileges that I hold, even in moments when I experience struggle and I experience marginalization. Also, as a white woman living in the 21st century, I am the product of multiple feminist movements that worked hard to achieve better lives for some while leaving so many others behind. And the sad truth of the fact is that when we left our Black, brown, and trans siblings behind in these movements, we all lost. Mickey Kendall, in her book Hood Feminism, notes from the movement, notes from the women that a movement forgets, talks about the tragic irony of millions of people in this country who continuously support certain causes out of fear and out of hatred of others, when they are most of the time supporting causes that go against their very own best interests. The fact that how disconnected can we be from each other that we would support systems that strip us of our own social benefits, that we would choose our social hierarchies over the health and well-being of our own families and our own communities. We must stop seeing the social uplift of the marginalized and accountability to the rich and the powerful as a threat to our own privileges, when really these movements aim to make all of our lives better. Because in a reality, a world where Jeff Bezos can get $637 billion richer, while the average American becomes poorer and sicker, is not a world that truly any of us want to live in. It is not a world we want to raise our children in. It is not a world that makes 99.99% of us, our lives, any better. We must love each other better than this. And I think you all are starting to get the idea of that. As I hear about the programs that you all do day in and day out to support this community, as I hear the way that you pray for and reach out to your neighbors, those people in your lives that are struggling. It is noted that one thing that is different about Ruth and Naomi's story than so many of the other stories in the Hebrew Bible is that although God is mentioned in this text, God is not an active character in the same way that God is in many other stories. But that does not mean God isn't just as present here. We see the presence of the divine in the way these two women love each other. We see God as Ruth clings to Naomi while tears run down both of their faces. We see God when Ruth refuses to accept Naomi's plea to leave her to fight this battle alone. God is present when Ruth declares Naomi's struggles and Naomi's joys as her struggle and her joy. So may we find God as we challenge ourselves to love each other in this same way. May we find God when we weep over the death of another person's child in the same way that we would our own. And may we also find God when we cheer the accomplishments of one community and the triumphs of one community as if it were our own victory. In the midst of simultaneous grief and hopefulness so many of us carry with us this holiday season, let us be reminded that we are more connected than ever in our triumphs and in our sorrows. As we finish out this year together in community, both present, physical community, and wider community, may you know this, that your sorrow is my sorrow, and your joy is my joy. Your faith and your hopefulness are my faith and my hopefulness. Your everyday gripes are my everyday gripes. May we always feel this kind of love for one another, that love that motivates us to lift each other up and to walk together, making sure to leave no one behind along the way. Amen.